All right. What is up, my peeps? Joshua Smith here with another GSD Mode podcast. And today we are joined by a good personal friend of mine, somebody that's crushing it and murdering it in the real estate business. Also a repeat guest here on the podcast. So welcome back to the GSD Mode podcast, Chris.
Thank you very much. I am thrilled to be here. And part two is going to be, the deuce is going to be much better than the first one. I have a feeling. So let's get right into it.
Yeah, I'm excited for this, man. I mean, so last time we had you on, because you've had an interesting career, and there's a lot of things I want to unpack on this podcast. I mean, number one, I want to talk about your real estate business and what you're doing to continue to crush it during these challenging times. And then I want to do a deep dive into what you're seeing with the market overall, just because you've got your experience now in real estate, but before that, you were in the financial markets. And so, you have a lot of expertise and awareness of what's going on behind the scenes that maybe a lot of other people aren't paying attention to. But first, man, let's start. So last time we had you on, you had built this very successful real estate business by smashing and crushing cold calls. You were just a machine jamming that phone, all day, every day. And one of the best in the business at it. Well, since then, you've dropped those, even though you were making, $50,000, $60,000 months from just cold calling to now just murdering it with YouTube. So I guess where I want to start is what led to that transition from the success that you're having in cold calls to making this move over to YouTube?
That is a great question. So I think I need to start by addressing just where I was at even before I started the cold calls, because the truth was I was failing out of the industry. I was getting ready to quit the business. I thought I may have to work at Home Depot or Publix or someplace else. I was a shell of myself. I, had lost a career that I thought I would do forever. And it was a lucrative career. And so when the income stream ended, and it ended abruptly, I thankfully had some savings and was set up okay, but I had no idea what I was going to do. Right. So of course I watched some $1 Million Agent shows, realized that was going to be my ticket because it looks really easy and look at all the pretty people and all the cool things. I'm sure I can do that. And what I quickly came to learn is that's not true. It is nothing like that. And so I went onto Zillow. I cold called the person who was selling the most real estate in my market, begged him for a job. He gave me one, and I was off to the races. Unfortunately, I had success almost immediately, which, when I say unfortunately, it was unfortunate because I thought it would be easy from that point on. I quickly had a $20,000 month. I'm like, this is the way. I'm back, baby. It's all good. Every month's going to be like this, or actually every month's going to be better than this, because that's the way I roll. And then I found, well, that's not really the case. That was just right time, right place. And I did get lucky. And the next 6 months were nothing like that. So it was big month out the gate. And then very quickly I was running out of money. I was terrified, didn't know what I was going to do next. And the leadership or the mentorship that I was receiving from this person was just not what I needed to hear. It wasn't resonating. It wasn't making sense. And it worked great for him. It didn't work great for me. So that is how I found you. I went out there on Google, and instead of aggressively cold calling people, I started looking for people who were putting out content that I found to be valuable. And your content was by far the best, most valuable content that I could find. And I found one of your listing presentations. And so I'm like, okay, cool. I got this. I'm going to get into action. I got into action. It wasn't until I joined your program, learned more about your business. And one of the things I've since learned, and I definitely want to share, and I hope anybody listening to this pays really great attention to this, because it is 1000% the truth. I have hired numerous mentors. I have taken numerous coaching programs, platforms, whatever you want to call it, and nobody comes close to you in terms of providing value and being available to be a resource by even like anywhere, any measure of proximity. I mean, you are light years ahead of everyone. You deliberately go out there and intentionally share your entire playbook. So everything from soup to nuts, A to Z, everything that's working in your business, you transparently show, which was tremendously helpful to me. I got the opportunity to come to one of your in-person masterminds. I role played with somebody in the in-person experience, and what I had been told, which is that cold calling does not work, it's outdated, nobody uses it. Well, I quickly realized that's my superpower. And as soon as I came back from that, I got into action making those calls. And that's when my business really started to take off, which basically brings us up to where I got to starting to know about YouTube, right? So I had this limiting belief that the highest and best use of my time was to continue to make these cold calls because they're profitable. I know if I get on the phone right now, I'll have 10 appointments by the end of today. That's just what I know to be true. So I didn't want to stop doing that, but I started to see different people within the mastermind take off by using YouTube. And so Trevor Jones was the first one, and he was a former Hollywood editor. So the content he was putting out was so next level that I was like, well, there's no chance I know how to do that. I'm never going to be that good. So I'm not going to do that. He's a unicorn. That's not going to work for me. And then time went on, and I started seeing more people that were putting out other content and claiming to have massive success. And whether they were or not is yet to be fully, that's a conversation for a different day. But it certainly caught my attention that other people out there who were making content were growing their real estate business. Now, while they were doing that, I was doing cold calls live in a Facebook group. So I was making content. I was just putting it on the wrong platform. I didn't really have a strategy. None of it was intentional. Actually, it was all just to provide value to anybody who wanted it for free. So I built this group, and I think I don't know. It's been a long time since I've actually posted in there, but I suspect it's close to about 10,000 people that are in that group that are still watching the content that I put out years ago, which takes me to, I had no intention of stopping that. And then I started to get some health issues, and my voice, I know you've had issues in the past with your voice, laryngitis, things like that. Well, I was starting to get that burnout too. And so this is before COVID, maybe the quarter before COVID happened. I started going to the doctor, trying to get treatment. And the remedy was, you need to stop talking for a month. Well, there's no shot in hell that I'm going to stop talking for a month, because that means I will no longer make any income. So it's in the back of my mind, I need to stop talking, but that's not something I was prepared to do. Then COVID hits. And when COVID hit, I don't know if people really remember what it felt like during that moment, but things have changed so much since then, and the world has changed so much since then, that it's almost kind of like an afterthought. But in that moment, I remember at first it was, oh, isn't this great? It's going to be 2 weeks off. Everybody will have a little party, and then it'll be back to normal. But when it became clear that it wasn't that 2 week blip, and it's going to be something longer, and it's undetermined, and the fear upticked, people started to lose their mind, right? It became a global event, and people altered their business and their lives materially. Fear was the dominant emotion that I think most people, fear and uncertainty was the most dominant thing that a lot of people got victimized by. I made the decision in that moment that I would not be one of those people. And so I looked at this from a different perspective. I looked at it as divine intervention. I said to myself, the doctor told me not to talk for a month. Here I have this quarantine that has been gifted to me. I am going to lock myself into my office, and I am not going to leave that home office until I have learned how to do YouTube the right way. And that's exactly what I did. I locked myself in my office. I made two commitments to myself. One, I would not leave quarantine without mastering YouTube. And then two, I would not get fat or out of shape. And so I was, while other people are out there drinking and partying and doing whatever they're doing, I became even more introverted, just locked down in my office. I told my wife and kids, do not, if the door's closed, do not knock on it. Do not talk to me. I am not here to be I was a complete a-hole, to be totally transparent, but I'm learning something, and this is going to be valuable. So they respected that. I didn't shower. I didn't eat. I didn't shave. I think they've got the, the No Shave November contest or whatever the thing is. I mean, I'm Irish. I don't typically grow facial hair to begin with, but you stick yourself in an office for a month and don't shave, you start to get a beard. I was nasty. I smelled, people weren't happy with me, but I was legitimately in that office learning YouTube for 20 hours a day. I wasn't sleeping. When I did sleep, I would dream about YouTube. Like became completely immersed, completely obsessed. And it should be noted, I knew nothing about YouTube previous to that. I had tons of limiting beliefs about my ability as it relates to YouTube. I knew I was good at making content. I knew that I could create an audience because I had done that in my group, but I didn't know how to edit at all. I didn't know what equipment. I had everything that anybody who is new to YouTube has as a obstacle that they have in front of them. I had all of those same fears too. So I bought a coaching program that was fairly expensive. I realized quickly I didn't understand anything that they were talking about. So I had to go back and find like the remedial classes that are available on Udemy, like YouTube for Idiots. That was the one that I started with. And I worked my way through each one of those programs. And, gradually over time, I learned what the terminology was. I wanted to get to a point where I was able to speak the language sufficient enough to be able to then offload it to an editor and be able to communicate with them the right way, hold them accountable the right way. But it was like learning Chinese. I don't know any of these terms. They're not natural to me. But I learned it. And so at the end of a month or whatever it was, I emerged, I took a shower, I shaved, but I reemerged, and I remember coming out and telling my wife and my kids, I'm like, I think I got it figured out. And so they're like, great, now what? Well, now what is get into action. And so that's what I did. I started making content. But what I did was what everyone does, right? So if you were to go online right now and Google how to start a YouTube channel for realtors or anything like that, you're going to find the same generic canned content that everybody's making. And I don't want to knock that because there's value in that. I think everybody should probably do those videos. But if you're looking to really build or really go next level, you need to find a way to get away from that as quickly as possible. Because if there's 100, it's a hyper competitive market now. If you've got 100 people that are doing the same content, then you're valueless and you're a commodity and you're not special. And whoever's watching this content is just going to pick and choose and devalue you because you're putting out the same content as everybody else. But we'll get to that later in the story. At first, it was simply put out content 2 a week at minimum. A lot of times I did more than that. A lot of times I did a lot more than that. But I ended up putting out at least 2 to 3 videos a week. And I did that for 10 months. During that 10 months, I completely stopped cold calling. Any other business that was coming in, I offloaded to my team. It was just me pushing out content, learning how to do the content. And really, it's all top of the sales funnel, right? So I know whatever content I'm making, I'm going to funnel them down into something where they either are opting in for something of value and I'll connect with them that way, or they're going to call directly. However, that was the theory that I had during the start of that 10 months, because during the 10 months, not one fucking phone call, not one text message, not one email. And the gurus that I was looking at for inspiration and guidance, they're all talking about, I did this for 3 weeks and I did $50 million in sales. Well, that was not my experience. I got bupkis. So here I am putting out the content, not getting the results. I'm starting to get pushback from everyone like, hey, Chris, this is crazy. Stop doing it. It doesn't work. I knew it would work because I knew it worked for if it worked for Trevor Jones, I know it will work for me. And there were other people in the program that were having success too. So I knew it would work. I just knew it was a matter of putting in the work. So did that for 10 months on the, 10 months in and a day after, I get my first phone call. And I didn't believe it was real at first. I thought it was my wife punking me, or, I'm on candid camera or whatever, or punked. But I was shocked. I was driving in the car, the phone rings, and they're like, Chris, you answered the phone. And I was completely blown away by the energy of what that was like. Because normally, if you're cold calling someone or you're prospecting a stranger, they are not very happy to hear from you. You have to win them over. You got to connect with them. You got to create rapport. But this person was a raving fan right out of the gate. They thought I was a celebrity, and there was zero pushback on anything because they had watched X amount of, I don't know how many hours of content, but they were a raving fan, ready to go, and the highest quality lead that I had ever received up until that point. So yeah, that was my start. And since then, I am blessed to be in the South Florida market. So I know I have some unique advantages just by geographic location, but it really never has slowed down very much. We're generating, I don't know, at least two to three leads a day in some form or fashion. And now I have the ability to be selective on who I want to work with and offload the rest. But it is the best decision I ever made. Anybody out there who is not doing YouTube should absolutely be doing YouTube. And it's a lot easier to get started, I think, than most people really understand.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's unpack that, dude, because when people just hear the story that you shared, and then now you're saying it's a lot easier than people think. Well, it wasn't easy for you the way that you went about it. Right. And, well, at least from hearing the story. Right. So then, and I really appreciate, dude, you sharing that. Look, it was 10 months of consistent work before you got that first lead, because I think a problem that most people have is they don't really identify realistic, true timelines and expectations of how long these things take. So people talk to me about doing YouTube. I'm like, hey, it's like, if you got to do it right and you got to be consistent, but plan on 9 to 10 months before you even get a lead. And if you're willing to do that, and if you do it right, you're talking about doing something right for 9 to 10 months with no fruits of your labors, then it starts to take off. And yeah, there's the flukes out there that, I've had, like, out of all my agents in my own personal team, I've had one that ended up, I think she's like within her first 90 days had like 5 clients, but that was just like a fluke thing, right? Like most, it's that longer time.
Well, let's be fair. I know who you're talking about. And she's also very attractive and very smart. That gives her a competitive advantage that I don't have, right?
Yeah.
So, but play to your strengths. Play to your strengths. And she's done an incredible job. So yeah, that's true.
All right. So let's look at and go through. Okay. So if, Chris today, knowing all this learning curve that you've been through, and you've kind of reinvented yourself multiple times with your YouTube channel. If somebody's wanting to get into the game now, like what would be your top advice of like where to start? What are the most important things to pay attention to? Because it's a science, dude. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah. So much like the advice that you gave me and everyone else who takes your mastermind or joins your program, you need to, and this is really important. You must understand what your foundational systems and processes are. You must know that. You must have that drilled in, because I have learned from my own experience, which I think you say in your first module, is don't get into action, don't get into production before you do these other things. Because if you do that, you are going to completely create chaos and overwhelm. And if you have to go back and relay that foundation, it's going to be a million times harder. That is the absolute truth. You must fully dial in those things to the best of your ability. And of course, you can go back and fix them and alter them and refine them. But one of the biggest regrets that I have myself is that I didn't do those things the right way. And I've had to piecemeal them back into place. Because the truth is, if I showed you the pipeline that I've actually generated in terms of signed buyer brokerages that have come in over the last 3 years versus what I've actually closed, you would throw up. It is unbelievable the amount of deals that I did not close. Now, that being said, I still closed a shit ton of deals. I ran the numbers. It's funny. I ran the numbers because my daughter's teacher invited me to go to their classroom to teach them about YouTube. I'm like, you know what? I haven't run the numbers here, and I think I should. But I was over 2 million in GCI that was generated from the channel over the last, I think it was 18 months. And so I'm like, that's pretty good. But it could have been 100 million. And so part of this also is, not to get to Dr. Phil here, but mindset. Like, this is going to be a grind. And there's going to be a lot of people that are out there that you're going to want to compare yourself to, and you're going to want to compete with. And I have learned that you're running your own race. So paying attention to anything that anybody else is doing from a, how would I say this? I wouldn't look at it, commit to the process, detached from the outcome. I wouldn't look at anybody else's numbers at all and use that as a reference point. What I would do is, and this is getting back to one of the foundational starting points, is I would do a tremendous amount of recon into content that's working for people in your space, right? So when I'm looking to, people ask me how much time do I spend on YouTube? It's 24/7. There's no time that I'm not thinking about what I can learn about YouTube or what content is working for somebody else. And I will go deep in the rabbit hole. I want to teach the algorithm to understand what I am looking for. And the algorithm is a tool, right? It is trainable. The algorithm changes constantly. So what worked in 2020 does not work today. What worked for you early when you were on YouTube does not work today. The things that I used on Facebook that worked when I first started, none of it works today. It's constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. And so I want to be on the forefront of what content creators in the space that I want to dominate in, what content is working for them. And I want to understand what that is. I want to pick up on what those cues are. I want to know what the hooks are, the thumbnails are, the titles are. I want to know everything I can about. I want to teach, well, one, I want to learn, but two, I also want to teach the algorithm what it is that I'm looking for, because then the algorithm will then show me other content creators that I would never find on my own, and it will suggest them. So I'll be able to learn who's up and coming and what trends are starting to develop way faster than I would ever find them on my own. The algorithm will teach it to me. And so I spend an enormous amount of time teaching the algorithm what I want to see so that it can then feed it to me so I can then rip off and duplicate it. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep. And so by teaching the algorithm, you mean like just going in, typing in what the keywords are that people would be searching for in there and just seeing, okay, well, what content now is just showing up in my feed?
So I get a little bit more specific than that. I've got my own YouTube account. I've set up a dummy account where it's just totally pristine and the algorithm hasn't been taught anything. What I'll do is I'll go into my main account, which is where I post everything, and I'll find what I want, right? And I'll find a creator that I want. And now it's like, it took me a long time at first. I would time block that research time, and schedule it. I don't do that anymore because I don't have to. It's just natural to me. But when I find a content creator that's putting out something that I find to be valuable, I'll then plug in the URL to that video into the dummy account, and I'll watch. I'll just plug in the URL, which means it will autoplay. I'm never using the search function, because if I use the search function, the algorithm isn't learning the same way. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I'll do that, and I'll watch numerous videos of them. I'll like 3 or 4 of them. I'll comment on 3 and 4 of them. Then I'll subscribe to it. But all I'm doing is teaching the algorithm what it is that I'm looking for, and that becomes its own little R&D channel. I've gotten away from that because now it's so second nature to me. But when I first started, I was doing that for hours a day, time blocked, very intentional. And I'd have, I don't know, thousands of videos that I posted in intentionally to teach the algorithm. That's critical. If you're not doing that R&D, you're probably not following the right people. And you need to, if you're looking to grow your channel, you have to know what the algorithm wants to see. And the only way you're going to do that is through R&D. I'll also say there's a big difference between growing a YouTube channel and getting leads generate. You can generate leads for your real estate business at a high level with a much smaller channel. I'm looking to do both.
Yep.
So you can have success doing all the same videos that everybody else is doing. 100%. I know plenty of people that have 3,000 subscribers and are crushing it in the real estate business through those leads. I'm looking to do both. I'm looking to grow the channel to the next level and turn that into a different type of business while still generating leads at a very high level. And so far it's been working out well. So I don't intend to stop anytime soon.
Yeah. Cause you got, okay, like I can become a YouTuber, right? Which means, getting a shit ton of views, taking advantage of, ad revenue, whatever, or, hey man, I'm going to use this intentionally to grow my real estate business and not worry about ad revenue, or you can do a combo of both. Yeah. And to your point, I'm glad that you brought that up, dude, because, so many people sit there like, oh, you'll get down on view count. Well, man, I know several, in this space and markets that are doing 6 figures a month in their YouTube channel, and their average view counts maybe 500 or 600 a video. It's not, so it doesn't always, mean actual revenue, right? So, all right. So then from there, man, when we're breaking this down, because like when it comes to YouTube, I mean, you got the video itself, then of course got thumbnails.
Well,
then we got,
let me jump in
okay,
if you don't mind. So if we go back to, I remember sitting with you and Ben Barber at the Clearwater event, the mastermind that we had, right? And I think, I don't know if it was you or Ben, but somebody asked me, what's your vision for the YouTube channel? Where do you want this to be in a year? And I didn't have an answer. I didn't know. It was unclear to me where I wanted the channel to go. I knew I wanted to continue to generate leads at a high level, but in terms of where did I see the channel growing, it was beyond my scope of understanding. I just knew it was a limitless possibility. I love those anything that's got unlimited upside is something that I'm typically going to be very interested in. It was only through my evolution of doing the content that everybody else is doing that I realized what my superpower was. And it was through the experience of a client that I had a listing with, who was a past client, and he calls me up, and a friend, I mean, this guy's losing his mind. This is as the stock market is starting to come down. So this is, I guess, maybe 2 years ago, but he works for Amazon, and he calls me up, and his Amazon stock just got murdered, and his house is for sale. He's not getting the results that he wants. And actually, that wasn't totally true. He was just impatient, right? So he's freaking out because he's under financial distress, which is new, right? There hasn't been a whole lot of well, we'll talk about that as we get further. But it was a listing, it was a client, it was a friend. He calls me up in a panic about his stock. And so I found myself walking around outside. I'm in the pool area of my house, and I'm talking him off the ledge. And I'm telling him, and I found myself going into stockbroker mode. I found myself going back into wearing the hat that I hadn't worn in a long time, but I used to wear for 18 years. So I'm going deep into everything I think about the financial market, everything I think about the economy, and everything I know to be true as it relates to Amazon stock and my experience. At the end of it, he's like, Chris, why aren't you talking about that on your YouTube channel? My response was, nobody cares. And he said, Chris, that's the only thing people care about. That's what you should be talking about. And that's when like the light bulb went off. I'm like, okay, wait a second. I think he might be right. That is my unique superpower. What makes me different than the 50 other people who are making the same pros and cons videos? Well, I've got 18 years of experience as a stockbroker. I've lived through each of the great financial crisis and every other thing that happened since 1997, which is when I got licensed as a stockbroker. So I'm saying, oh my gosh, I've got this endless ability to talk about lots of different things that I just thought were off limits to me. Let me start talking about those things. And so literally, as soon as he got off the phone with me, I hung up. I didn't have the gimbal. I didn't have the earbuds. I didn't have anything set up the right way. I just flipped the camera and started talking. And that video got, I don't know, if my videos previous to that were getting 1,000 or 2,000 views, this video got 10,000 views. And I was like, oh shit, this is what I need to talk about moving forward. And that's when I niched down. That's when I got very specific about understanding I don't want to make content for everyone. I don't want to do business with everyone. I want to do business with a very specific avatar. The avatar that I want to speak to is not the person who's going to go out there. It's not your first time home buyer, although I do work with first time home. I work with everybody. I want to help everybody. But my ideal client, which you talk a lot about, is, get very granular. Who is your ideal client? Well, my ideal client is somebody who can stroke a check right now for $1 million and buy or more and buy a house. They're not worried about mortgage rates. They're not worried about, anything. They've got the money to do whatever they want to do, whenever they want to do it. That is who I want to cater to. So I just changed my mindset into what is the language they speak? What are their fears and concerns? What are the things that they are most interested in? And then I started creating content about all of those things. That's when the channel blew up. And that's when the business associated with that also blew up.
Yep. Yep. Love it, dude. So then, when we started then breaking back, okay, so, niching down earlier, and I'll just kind of go through some different questions on different things when it comes to YouTube. Sure. So earlier you talked about frequency, hey, I was doing 2 videos a week at a minimum. What is frequency? Knowing what you know now today, how important is frequency, and what do you recommend is being, enough frequency to really get that momentum on our channels?
Well, that's a great question. And it's changed recently for me. So recently I found an AI service, which completely has changed the game for me in terms of content creation. So previous to finding this, and I will keep watching because it's coming, I would put out at least 2 long form videos a week. But I had even gotten to a point where I was doing 1 a day and sometimes multiple a day, because I found the best content that I make is when I'm triggered by whatever the thing is. So, and this is only because I'm constantly meeting and becoming friends with content creators. Content creators can be the best people in the world. And then it's kind of funny because anybody who I find that is making content, I try to reach out to and mastermind with, become friends with. You've got a select group that is super cool. They're like me, they're like you, they're open books. They want to help. They want to have the conversations because they feed off it too. And then you got the other folks that are out there that think they've got the limited mindset. They think you're competition. They don't want to talk to you at all. So you'll end up building your tribe. I think I got off of where I was going here. Bring me back to where I was going.
We were talking about frequency. You were doing at least 2 a week.
Frequency. Yeah. So what I found is, and I've gone through different iterations. I got to a point where I had hired editors, and I had basically offloaded all the work. So I shoot the content, they bring it back to me, they upload it. But it was about a 4-day turnaround from when I do the video to when I actually get it back. And 4 days would be good. Well, what I realized is the content that I'm making is very, very time sensitive. So yesterday, the Fed raised Fed funds rates. Well, if I don't put that video out that day, it's completely useless today. And it's certainly completely useless 5 days from now. So I got away from that completely. I went low budget in terms of, you see my background here. I'm off a webcam. And if it's not off my webcam in my office, it's off my phone 90% of the time. But frequency is very important if you're talking about time sensitive issues. And I have found myself more open to, and it's harder to time block this, but anytime I see anything, any news event that I have a emotional reaction to, I'll say it differently. Anytime I see anything that triggers me, I'm making a video instantly. Doesn't matter where I'm at, doesn't matter who's with me. If I get that emotional charge, I want to capture that on video and I want to put it out. So that's not really answering your question. What's the most optimal? Well, I think so far this month, I put out 120 videos. Most people aren't going to be able to do that. What you will be able to do is if you're putting out 2 long form content pieces a week, you can then take those long form contents, that content, and turn it into short form content. Now, we talked about this the other day, so you know about it already, but there's a service called Opus Clips, and it's AI. So you plug in your long form content, it then spits back 10, 15, or however many short form pieces, which are a breakdown of your long form content. Well, Now I can do two long form videos a week and then end up with 10 to 15 short form clips. And I can just be like, I can put out endless content all day long.
So then, because this is a conversation I'm having with a lot of real estate related channels of, and most haven't jumped on the short form game, with shorts and whatnot there. What are you seeing with that, putting the shorts on there and adding those and breaking those up? How is that helping your channel? What is it doing? Like, what are the results? Because you've been hitting that hard pretty now. I mean, for a month or two?
Yeah. So I've experimented with shorts numerous times. And what I learned is, so I wasn't really sure. I wasn't positive what a short was. Now, I know what it is. It's a short form content. I get what that means, but I wasn't sure how that would impact the algorithm. And for me, I'm so hyper intent on ensuring that I'm putting out the right content for the right avatar. When I started getting into shorts the first time, I just wasn't sure what the right short form content was for the avatar. So my first entry into short form content was, okay, if my avatar is someone similar to me, well, then if I think something's cool, chances are they're going to think it's cool and they're going to watch. And I was somewhat right. So like, for example, one of the first short form contents that I did was I was going to the gym. There was a green Lambo that was parked next to me. I get like a 3-second clip of the Lambo and I'm like, cool car. I mean, because it was a cool car. I thought it was cool. I'm thinking my avatar will think it's cool. That video, I think, got 50,000 views like immediately. It just took off, but it completely distorted the algorithm's efficacy. So it got a lot of views. The vanity metrics from that short form was great, but it was the wrong avatar. So then I had to reteach the avatar by if you screw up the algorithm by putting out something that's not ideal for your avatar, you're going to end up having to reteach the algorithm what your avatar wants to see. So my first entry into short form was me just posting cool things like that. And then I kind of got away from it because I realized in order for me to put out the right short form content, I got to hire somebody. I've got a content library of about 1,000 videos. Some of those videos are an hour long. I'm going to have to train someone as to what I think is the relevant talking points. I'm going to have to train them. I mean, it's a metric shit ton of work. And it's a metric shit ton of training. And it's a metric shit ton of money to get them up to speed, to get you the content that you want. So I'm like, I'm not doing this. I'm having success with long form until I found the Opus Clips thing. And then and that's the power of AI. You can just repurpose the content that you have, and that will 100% be relevant to your avatar. And that will teach the algorithm what you want it to. So you mentioned it's been about a month. Now, most of my traffic is coming from the short form content. And it's literally been the last 28 days. And the last 28 days, my analytics show that it went from, normally it was either a YouTube search would be where the top of the sales funnel comes from. Recommendation would be a close second. But now it's flipped. Now it's short form content is number one, and it's organic YouTube, not SEO. SEO doesn't work. SEO is very low. You want that to be very low. You want the algorithm to be recommending you, and that's what ended up happening for me.
Yeah. So is there such a thing as too much? Like when it comes to, putting out the shorts and I guess content overall, but is there, is it 1 a day? Is 10 a day too much?
I don't think there's any such thing as too much. What I would say, now that's not true. What can you handle? Right. So if you've got the people, places, systems, and processes to be able to insulate you, to be able to live your life elsewhere, well, then there's no such thing as too much. If it's you burning yourself out on both ends of the candle and it's you doing everything, well, then I can tell you it's not going to be sustainable. It's real hard to do everything yourself. So what's the happy medium? I would say if you're putting out, and again, I'm talking to somebody who is not as crazy or as obsessed as I am. If I'm a new agent, then my goal would be I want to put out at least 2 videos a week. And from those long form content, I want to get at least 10 short form pieces from that long form. And I want to put them. So if I'm putting out the video, I'm making this up. I put out a long form on Monday. Well, that long form is going to yield at least 10 new short forms. Well, that's Tuesday and Wednesday. Thursday, you do a long form content, which then gives you Friday and Saturday. I don't know if I got the days right, but you can book the entire week from 2 pieces of long form content. And depending on where you're at in your journey, I don't know of anybody who can't do at least 3 videos a week if they're intentional with their time.
Yeah, and Opus is dope. I mean, it's only like $20 a month, right? You toss
Yeah.
it in there, bam, 20 minutes later, it's got everything for you. It's scored. It's, quick to download, quick to upload. Now, are you repurposing these? Because a YouTube short is essentially the same thing as like a Facebook Reel, TikTok, Instagram Reel. Are you also taking those and uploading that same content in these other platforms?
Yes, 100%. So, but to be abundantly clear, don't take so if you do a short and then download the short and then upload the short from YouTube into one of the different platforms, you're going to get penalized. So you need to make sure it's the native file that you're putting in separately. So YouTube gets its own native piece of content. TikTok gets its own. I wasn't on TikTok until 30 days ago, and now my TikTok is blowing up. Same thing with Reels. I hadn't used Reels at all. And now I've spent no time trying to study the algorithm for Facebook or TikTok. I just know that I'm overwhelming it with the short form content, and I'm just seeing the analytics take off. So I'll learn that too eventually, but I know it's working.
Yep. Yeah, 100%, dude. So then, all right.
Actually, I got a funny story for you.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So I put out so people are all afraid, oh, the housing market's crashing, right? And interest rates are going at 10%. It's the end of the world. Okay, cool. In my market, there certainly is an uptick in inventory, but if you've got the right home, it's the right product, and it's priced the right way, and you do the things the right way, well, you're going to create a market within a market, and you're definitively going to have multiple offers that bid the price higher. So I get this showstopper home. I price it the right way. I do this incredible. It was not trying to break my arm to pat myself on the back, but I put out this killer short form content showcasing this listing. I turned that into a long form content, which of course is actually the short form content was called "Don't Move to Boynton Beach." Well, that's a hook. I'm intentionally saying, like, no one's going to say, "Come check out my beautiful listing." Nobody's going to click on that. But if I say, "Don't move to Boynton Beach," well, chances are they're going to click on that and be interested, and they were. But I popped that into another video, and I was talking about another house in the community. Mind you, as this is happening in the background, I've got 4 buyers. They're bidding the price higher. I've got a competitive negotiation going on, and we're about to set a record on this home, which dispels the myth that the housing market's crashing in my market. Anyhow, I get a phone call from the agent, and she says, "My buyer's having cold feet." I said, "Okay, well, thank you for letting me know. We're going to pivot to the next buyer." She goes, "Well, I want to let you know why." I said, "Well, why?" She goes, "She saw your video." I'm like, "Well, she saw my video. That's great. I'm glad to see that it's having some reach." She goes, "But you talked about this home was sitting on the market for 150 days and it's a disaster and all these things." I said, "You didn't watch the content. You just reacted to what you thought it said. The video that I put out was me highlighting the home that I have for sale. And if you watched a little further, you'd see the unsold property that I am knocking. That house is never going to sell." So I created an objection for myself because people don't watch the video. They just react to the thumbnail and title and tone of the first 3 seconds. So the good news is we did go under contract. We did set a record, but that buyer did renege, and we ended up going with a backup contract. Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, dude. Yeah, so my son, my 10-year-old, he's got a YouTube channel. Like he, wants to be a YouTuber like every kid. But then I'm like, all right, bro, like quit talking about this. Like, I'm not going to let you just fucking watch YouTube all day. Like if you want to be on YouTube, you're gonna be creating a shit ton of content. So we got him a setup, all of this. And but dude, like he just crushes, man. I mean, he's got certain videos with over 1 million views, goes like, and he just does,
Wow.
little, like it's all, we don't allow him to show his face. It's all like, it's not under his name, it's all anime stuff. Cause at 10, he's into anime. But then I was asking him, cause he started, teaching me, shorts, and like he's read like anything Daryl Eves puts out. My 10-year-old is just obsessed with him, dude. Right.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But then I was like, Jackson, I mean, like, I'm doing a short a day. Do you think it'd be too much if I do 2 a day? And he looks at me, he's like, Dad, I do like 20 a day. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, damn, dude, I gotta, step up my game. So then a last thing on YouTube, then I want to get in the market stuff. So, CTR, retention rate, and then average views per viewer. Are those things that you pay attention to? And if so, what are kind of the target ranges that you want to see within those to know if your content's on point or not?
Those are great questions. And that means you definitely have been listening to Daryl Eves because those are things that he talks about.
I follow Mr. Beast, and Mr. Beast is coached by him. So
yeah. Well, I took Daryl Eves coaching. I went out to Vid Summit. I met Mr. Beast. I went through all those things, and it was a very cool experience. Because I have a real estate business and I'm aware that this is the top of the sales funnel for that, the number one metric that I want to see from that angle is how many calls am I getting? How many leads is it producing? Is it still effective? Because if I started going buck wild from a YouTube content creator perspective and the phone stopped ringing, well, now I got a problem and I need to readjust and realign and refine whatever it is that I'm doing. Fortunately, that hasn't been the case. So from a content creation space, I want to keep them, the main thing so the vanity metrics are irrelevant. I don't care what the view count is. What I'm very interested in is how long are they watching the video, right? I want to see when they're jumping off and jumping on. I want to study the analytics of, are they staying over a certain threshold? Are there certain spikes or peaks or valleys where I'm gaining them or losing them? And if there's a pattern of where what I'm saying is gaining attention or whatever, obviously I want to learn from that. I want to do more of that. And if I'm losing them because I'm saying a certain phrase or tonality or whatever it might be, I want to learn from that. So the YouTube Studio is your friend. You definitely want to become very aware of those analytics. But watch time is very important. I want them to stay. I want to retain them for as long as possible. And then separately, how many views are they doing? How many views am I getting per viewer? Right. And what I found is that it changed. I mean, it's fluid. Everything always changes. Right. But since I started doing the short form, the vanity metrics have upticked a lot. I haven't checked recently, but I went from, my jump from 2 million to 2.5 million was so fast. It like happened before I even noticed in terms of total view. But what I'm really more interested in, are they watching more than one video? And that number continues to be on the uptick too. So what you definitely want to do is create content that hooks them in a way where they keep watching more and more of your content.
Yep. Okay. So when you say, retention, like what is for like, for real estate specific stuff, cause I mean, I hear different things from different people, but it's like, what again is like, is it 50%? Is it 70%? Like what is an ideal, like here would be the goal to make sure I'm reaching with each video?
Honestly, I don't know. And I'll tell you why, because I found that most of the people who actually call don't watch the same amount. They're two different audiences, right? So people who have watched maybe 30 seconds of 10 or 15 videos and they want to do business, they're calling immediately. It's a different audience that is really consuming the content at a high level. A lot of those people are never, because I talk about the truth and I hook people with fear. I've got a lot of folks that are avid YouTube content consumers, and they comment a lot and they can get very aggressive in the comment section. They're never going to buy a home, but they watch the most videos. So if you're trying to tie together those two things, it's hard to do, or I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, man, I've seen your comment section, dude. It's like grab your popcorn, just sit back, and it becomes
Well,
crazy, dude.
well, no, but I'm glad you brought that up. I almost got thrown off the platform. So I got one of the things that I really enjoyed is the comment section. So if you leave, and I'm very authentic, I'm myself. If you leave a stupid comment, well, chances are I'm going to come back at you with something professionally appropriate, but I'm going to smack the shit out of you with something funny, right? And I enjoyed that, but I tracked that too. I was spending 10 hours a week in the comment section, thoughtfully replying to the people who deserve a thoughtful reply, and then writing something sarcastic to the folks that don't. But out of the blue, I got a warning from YouTube saying that I had violated their hate speech policy. And so the first one came in, and I'm like, one, I know for certain I didn't violate any hate speech policy, but I was concerned. I'm like, well, maybe hate speech means something different than what I think it does. So I went down the rabbit hole, read all the terms of service, and it turns out that hate speech is what I thought it was. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is a one-off event. But the warning says that the first strike is or the first warning is a warning. The second one, they take down your comment section, and the third one, they can just boot you off the platform. And very quickly, I got a second warning. So now I'm terrified. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I lose the top of the sales funnel, this is a big income hit. I need to start pivoting to other places to protect myself. So I did. I started pivoting to Twitter. I started pivoting to Patreon. But then I realized the number one way for me to eliminate the possibility of being accused of hate speech is by just not commenting. So my policy forward is I no longer comment. But YouTube does not tell you who accused you of what. They don't tell you what you said. They give you no information. There's no recourse. It's just you may have done a hate speech violation. And if you may do it again, we can throw you off the platform. That's terrifying.
Yeah, we've seen no shortage of that in the last few years, dude. It's been, but the cool thing is a lot of these other, which, I'm a big believer in diversifying anyway. It's like, why just be on Facebook when I can repurpose that same content on Instagram, TikTok, so it's like, be on Rumble, be on Twitter, Instagram now, reels can be up to an hour. It's like, just get that shit everywhere, and insulate yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
All right, dude. So love it, man. So let's now transition into the market, dude, because it's lots going on. Number one thing, when I just released a video or a podcast, so video and audio, but about the real estate market crash. Released it actually this morning. And there's just a lot of signals that I'm seeing. Now, by no means do I don't have a crystal ball, especially now that we've went into this, switch our monetary system from Keynesian economics to this, MMT that we're amongst right now, where, the deficits and debts don't seem to matter. And there is no more to, there seems to no longer be a debt ceiling. It's like, all right, we can't go necessarily based off historic data, because if things were done how they've always been done, we'd be in a 16-year-long depression right now. So we're in this artificial economy anyway. So it's like, I don't know how long this shit can keep going. I just know at some point it might stop, but I'm not as optimistic as maybe a lot in our industry that this thing's just going to keep going, but with that, you've been a dude that, with your previous background in the financial world, you've been through 9/11, you've been through the great financial crisis. You've seen your share of liquidity crises. So I guess maybe where to start, like, I'm going to steal from Adam. Was it Adam Taggart off Wealthion? What's your current assessment, of the current economy?
Okay. Well, let me just start off by saying I'm not an economist. I am not a financial advisor anymore. I am by no means an analyst. I'm certainly not professionally qualified to give a real educated opinion. But that being said, I was a stockbroker for 18 years, and I did navigate through every market that existed from 97 until when I got out 18 years later. And I think right now, at least, and I'll use my market as the example. there's a lot of high income earners that are in my market, right? So combined family income, and I'm making up numbers, but if you got a husband and wife and they both make $500,000, well, then you've got $1 million household, right? And many folks, in fact, I would argue almost everybody within my market lives above their means, right? So you've got $1 million earnings, that's great, but you got $1,000,001 lifestyle or $1,000,002 lifestyle or $1,000,000 whatever lifestyle. Well, chances are when the recession or the layoffs or the whatever bad thing happens, you are going to be in financial distress. And that's just not open for debate, right? One of the things that I find to be very interesting is if you look at the Florida Realtor stats, you'll see that there are almost no foreclosures. There are almost no distress sales. They are statistically insignificant. They're almost not there. And I took that at its face value for a while. It was only recently that I started looking at this from an investor perspective, me being the investor. And I said, I wonder if that number is actually true, because it doesn't really make sense with some of the things that I believe. And so if you look up the Florida numbers, you'll see, and every realtor will tell you, there are no foreclosures. There are no distress sales. They don't exist. It's never going to happen. This is not like 2008. Okay, well, if you go to your county auction site, I think you will be shocked to learn, because I was shocked to learn how many foreclosure auctions are happening that just aren't on the MLS, but they're happening every day. There are tomorrow, I think there's something like 15 that are in in Palm Beach County, but that schedule is out until February next year. So there is a scheduled process of distress sales that are happening. None of those are being reported in the MLS, period, but they're happening. Now, those distress sales, they didn't start yesterday. They started 2, 3, however many years ago. Well, the foreclosure market in housing nationally, I think it was at its highest in what, 2010?
Yeah, roughly. It's either
Right?
late 09, early 2010.
Okay, so 09, 010. Well, the great financial crisis happened in 2007 and 2008. So it's going to be about a 3 to 5 year lag, depending on how savvy the homeowner is and what games they play. But you can expect, everyone knows, or I don't know if everyone knows, housing is lagging. It's not leading. So what are the leading things that you can see today that you can govern yourself accordingly with? Well, and I know you know these stats. I just look at bankruptcies. So bankruptcies in Florida are up. Oh, I wrote it down. This is blah, 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 blah. I think they're up. Okay, so Florida bankruptcies are up 11% so far year to date in 23 versus 2022. Okay, 11%. Well, you could say 11% uptick in personal bankruptcies isn't a big deal, but it only took 10% of the overall housing market to be in distress to bring down values by 30% on a national level. Well, that was the national level. There were plenty of markets that got hit a hell of a lot harder than that. And that's where you hear these stories about half price homes and all these other kind of things. Foreclosures are, they are happening right now. They're just not being talked about the same way. And do I think that most people are going to be in a forced sale situation anytime soon? No, because they can sell the house, and most people have a shit ton of equity. They can sell the home, they can make some money, they can move on with their life. Up until they can't, that the pricing is set on the fringe minority. And if somebody gets caught with a forced sale in your street, your subdivision, your neighborhood, and you're living in I don't know, I'm making up numbers. Your average price point in your neighborhood is $1 million, but they sell at 800. Well, guess what? Even though nothing's changed with your home, your house is now worth 800. And that catch a falling knife game is going to happen. There are too many people that are too extended out there financially that might not be in financial distress on their home, but they might be on their car. And if somebody gets laid off or their wages, or not even wages, their income takes a hit, well, if you can't afford to play the game anymore, well, you're going to be forced to sell. And, the house is the last thing they're going to sell. But if you look at the car repos, which what's the number, like 20,000 a day? Yeah. So there are all types of leading indicators that you can look at right now that tell me that there's a lot of financial distress that's in the market. And each market's going to trade differently. There are some markets that are more insulated than others, but it's undeniable that there is going to be some form of correction or crash at some point in the future. The government, yesterday they just raised Fed funds rates by, what was it, a quarter point? Well, if the cost of borrowing increases and the banking system, which is most challenged by that, we saw the banks fail. We saw SVB. Well, now they're making it harder to borrow money, but now they have a backstop in that the Treasury will backstop. I mean, they're just playing games all over the place. What I don't know, and neither do you, neither does anybody else. I don't know when the top of the market's going to be. I don't know when the bottom of the market's going to be. Anybody who tells you that they do is totally full of shit. Run away from them because they're lying to you. But I know there are too many things that are in the system, that are baked into the system, that something has to fail. I just don't know when.
Yeah.
So at some point, it could be tomorrow, it could be 2 years from now, it could be 20 years from now, it could be never, because as you mentioned, right now, the Big Papa Powell, Fed treasurer or Fed chairman, is doing everything that he can to sustain inflation. And then Congress goes out there and stimulates and writes checks and creates liquidity to an insane degree. So it completely undercuts everything that he just did. But there's no way that you can't predict with accuracy when it's going to happen. I just know that it has to happen. I don't know when.
Yeah. And what are governments notorious at historically for when they get themselves in an uncontrollable debt situation is they inflate themselves out of it. It's what we saw in the 70s and 80s, dude. They went from, 70% debt to GDP down to 30%. Wasn't the debt change. It was that they had a decade of, insane inflation, and it very well could be the game that they need to play right now or feel that they need to play to manage this current debt situation.
Well, look, we've talked about this before. Mortgage interest rates, I think they were just pushing 8%. They're going to 10. There's no way that we're not going to see mortgage interest rates reset back to a historical norm. Do I think it's likely that the government's going to play games in the interim? 100%. Do I think that they're going to do everything they can to find something to point to economically that looks like a win so that they can get elected? 100%. Are they not going to lie to us? Well, I don't know. Ben Bernanke got in front of Congress and said there's no way that the housing market could ever crash right before the housing market crashed. So I don't expect anybody to tell us the truth. The unemployment numbers that they're coming out with are total bullshit. You've talked about this a lot in the past. They're doing all types of things to, the big thing that I hear is that it's different this time because the loans are different and the capital or the credit quality of the borrower is different. And so therefore it's not the same predatory loan environment. Okay, cool. That was true for a period of time. But if you looked at, when I was dealing with lenders who were trying to get buyers approved and they're playing games with debt to income, believe me, there are games that people can play to get people financing. And now the government's coming up with all these new programs that are not called what they used to be called. But if you've got 1% mortgages, or you've got people with good credit subsidizing people with bad credit, if you're doing all these different things and creating all these different products, they're not called subprime loans anymore, but essentially they're subprime loans. What I really think we're going to have, and this is certainly true in my market, there's a massive shortage of new listings. People who are in at 2, 3, 4%, they're not going to make the trade into something 8, 9, 10% at all unless they have to. So there's almost a reverse crash that's happening here, in that I think we're going to be looking at a massive bubble. If you thought what we got so far is a bubble, I think it's going to get a hell of a lot bubblier. I don't know how long that lasts, but that bubble has to get eviscerated. I don't know when. I could be wrong. I'm not rooting for it, but I mean, you study history the same way I do. There is not one country in the history of the world who has done the things that we have done and didn't have to face a great reckoning. What I hope is that we can figure out how to solve that great reckoning, in a orderly fashion that doesn't result in a total collapse and chaos. But who knows?
Now, by collapsing chaos, do you just mean another massively deflationary recession like we saw in, during the great financial crisis?
That would be the best case scenario.
Yeah.
It could be a hell of a, yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. It could be really, really bad, and nobody knows. And I look, people, I get this phone call all the time. I'm sure you get this phone call all the time. Well, what should I do? Should I buy? Am I crazy to buy a house right now? Or am I crazy to take on this interest rate? Am I crazy to do this, that, or the other thing? And I just stop everybody completely. It has nothing to, whether you buy a house, sell a house, rent a house, do anything that you're going to do has nothing to do with me. It's what's right for you. If you've done your due diligence and you must move and you need to move and you want to move and you can afford to move and you've checked all the boxes, and my job is to make sure you've done your due diligence. If you've done your due diligence and you can accept the terms that you're agreeing to now, well, then buy the house, enjoy the house, max out the utility of the house. Never look at Zillow, never look at what the value of the house is. You were never planning on selling it anyway, anytime soon, because that's one of the questions that I ask. If your timeline is 15, 20 years, then set it and forget it and enjoy the house. But in the interim, there could be a lot of volatility. And if you're not prepared for that volatility, well, then you should probably not buy the house. And that's not my decision to make, and it's not your decision to make. Our job is to lead them through the process so they make the best decision for themselves, for their family, and for their financial bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah. I always like to remind people, because I'll get it's like most of the agents, like let's just say in my team, and most that are just in this industry, haven't been in, since pre-2012. But I just like to remind people, because everybody, like when you talk about a crash, they're like, oh, it's not crashing. And they think like it's got to be in, a near-term timeline. And the reminder I always like to give is, okay, my market here in Phoenix peaked in May of 2004. Then it was a 31-month slow progression building up to, 2008, where just incremental, small, month over month, tiny inventory increases. Where if you weren't really paying attention to it, you didn't even notice it. Then 08, shit fell off a cliff. We know what happened then, but then it was another 24 months before the market bottomed out. So I'm like, you're talking a 51 or 50, what's that, 55 month build up from peak to bottom. Like this isn't a fucking speedboat, right? Like like these things build up. And when people are like, oh, it's going to be like, dude, it's inevitable. There's going to be a crash, right? Like it's at some point on some timelines, trees don't grow forever. Otherwise they'd be touching the sun. Right now, we don't know how to dictate that, right. But it does amaze me of how many people just don't approach it with precaution and prepare, because I look at this like, dude, we are living amongst the most unaffordable time in at least our country's recorded history to be alive and just try to operate. Just thinking about that, right? And then if you look at, almost an 8%, 7.5% increase in just consumer debt in the last, between Q1 of 2022 and Q1 of this year, which is amongst the largest increase in a single year in, our country's recorded history. Savings being dwindled out, debt maxed out, consumer debt, government debt, corporate debt, all fronts. I'm like, at some point, the pressure keeps building up. Like at some point, something's going to happen. I just don't know, to your point, when that's going to be. Because again, it's bail out, stimulus, right? It's like, this shit should have crashed 5 months before COVID. right?
Yeah.
I mean, we had a liquidity crisis on a magnitude of, you know, slightly larger size than the great financial crisis, $6 trillion bailout, September of 2019, 5 months before COVID. The only difference was this time they were ahead of it. So you didn't have the Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers collapse, didn't have panic in the streets, you know, but that was 5 months before COVID. The system broke again, you know? So yeah, it's just, you know, and we could
Well,
jam on this shit for hours, but
well, yeah, but think about it. Look at the commercial real estate market in some of these cities, right? They're just getting fucking murdered. Like the valuations of these buildings that they're pennies on the dollar, right? Well, what people don't think about, or maybe they don't consider, is how many different equity products have been tied to that, right? So how many pension funds are invested in these different commercial buildings or REITs or however they securitize these things, which are now, if they were worth 100, now they're worth 20, right? How many pensions are exposed to those losses? And there are a lot. I don't know what the exact number is, but there's a lot. So there are a tremendous amount of mom and pop pension holders or securitized investment holders that are tied to commercial real estate, and commercial real estate is going to it's already being eviscerated, but it hasn't necessarily been realized. The government's going to have to bail that out. There's no way that they're going to let a pension fund or pension funds go unfunded. Because that will be, you saw what happened in France. There will be blood in the streets. So what does the bailout number look like for that? It's in the trillions. And that's just one element to it. You talk about the auto repo market. How many banks are exposed to that debacle, which has not been realized yet? They're not realizing these losses yet. So what's the black swan? I don't know. I just know that there's a giant lake of black swans that are just all kind of swimming right next to each other. Which one's going to impact us first? I don't know. Can the government stroke a check to feed or to placate all the black swans? I don't know. There's just a lot of uncertainty in the market, but that shouldn't be anything anybody's afraid of, because there's nothing to be afraid of. The market is always good for someone. If you're buying a house because you need to buy a house and you can afford to, well, then it doesn't matter what a black swan's doing. You know, you control your own personal economy. And so there's nothing to be afraid of. What I think people really appreciate from me and from you too, is I'm telling you the truth. Here's what I think could happen. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but I'm telling you the truth. You make the decision, what's right for you. And if it's right for you, then it's right for me, and God bless, good luck. But nobody can ever tell me that I didn't tell them what the risks inherent are, at least best from my perspective.
yeah, no, I love it, man. Love it, dude. So Chris, where is the best place for people to get in touch with you? Maybe they got a referral for your market. Maybe they want to continue following or start following all your amazing content, everything that you're putting out. Like where are the best places to do that?
YouTube is probably the best place. It's at Chris Igoe 1, and I think all of my other social media is either at Chris Igoe 1 or at Igoe Home Group. But I'll give you the links. You can put it in the copy below, and reach out anytime. We'd love to help.
Yep, 100%. All right, brother. Well, I truly appreciate you taking time out of your busy to be here, dude. This has been a hell of a lot of fun, brother.
Yes, sir. It was awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
100%. And those watching, listening, as always, truly appreciate you watching. Truly appreciate your support. Keep crushing it. Keep kicking ass. And we will see you next time. Peace.
Peace.